Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. New York, in the dead of winter. The sidewalks are icy, the lights of the skyscrapers twinkle like stars lost in the urban night. In the city center, where luxury cars speed by and people hurry by, bundled up in expensive coats, sits a small Italian restaurant on the corner of a narrow street. The place is popular, but unpretentious. A warm atmosphere emanates from the steamy windows. Inside, Emma Carter, a 26-year-old administrative assistant, finishes her meal alone at a table by the window. Her face, framed by her slightly wavy brown hair, reflects the weariness of a long, stressful day. She observes the other customers, the lively conversations, the laughter, and feels slightly out of place. Unlike the others, she doesn't bother ordering the most expensive dishes or trying to appear important. Her gesture is simple, she politely asks to take away the leftovers. A humble, almost insignificant request, but in this world where everything seems designed to impress, it draws attention. A few tables away, James Whitman, the charismatic and demanding CEO of the company where Emma works, watches her. His features are hard, his eyes piercing, but tonight something in Emma's gesture piques his curiosity. It's not ordinary modesty, nor simple restraint, it's a quiet dignity, a rare humanity in this world where everything is calculated. When Emma gets up, clutching her small paper bag with the leftovers, James feels a mixture of fascination and unease. Who is this young woman who dares to be herself in such a superficial world? Without thinking, he decides to follow her, an instinct he almost never allows himself. He leaves the restaurant, wrapped in his dark coat, and disappears into the crowd. Emma, unaware of what awaits her, walks purposefully through the neon-lit streets. Her pace is quick but graceful, her breath forming small wisps in the frigid air. Each corner reveals the stark contrasts of New York, luxurious storefronts, dilapidated buildings, homeless people huddled in blankets. Yet Emma seems unperturbed. Her purpose is clear, her heart guided by an instinct nobler than most, to use what she has to help those less fortunate. From a distance, James sees what he never could have imagined. This simple act of asking for leftovers is the gateway to a world he knew nothing about, a world of quiet generosity, everyday courage, and a humanity that isn't measured in profits or titles. Tonight, his life, and Emma's, will change forever. Emma Carter left the restaurant, adjusting her wool scarf around her neck. The winter wind bit at her cheeks, but she didn't slow her pace. In her brown paper bag, the remains of her meal trembled slightly with each step. She knew exactly where she was going, a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, but more importantly, a place where her actions, however simple, would make a difference. A few meters behind, James Whitman moved cautiously, observing Emma's every move. He didn't want to draw attention to himself, but he felt irresistibly drawn to her determination. Something about her quiet yet resolute demeanor betrayed a strength few possessed. Emma walked down the main street and turned into a darker alley, where the streetlights flickered and the shadows of the buildings seemed denser. Her footsteps echoed on the cobblestones, but she wasn't afraid. She knew this neighborhood like the back of her hand. It wasn't a place of luxury, but it was home, it was where her actions had meaning. James felt a mixture of fascination and apprehension. He had never followed an employee out of the office, much less into a neighborhood he himself considered dangerous. And yet, every step Emma took seemed to confirm something he couldn't ignore: she wasn't like the others. Emma finally arrived at a small building with peeling walls and a front door bearing the marks of time. She took out a small set of keys and went inside, disappearing into the shadows. James remained outside for a few moments, hesitating. Then, driven by a curiosity he couldn't suppress, he slipped his hand into his pocket and found his phone. He knew he had to understand. Inside, Emma switched on a small lamp that illuminated a modest but warm apartment. The kitchen was simple, but neatly organized. She placed the restaurant leftovers on the table and began to prepare something more than just a meal. She was making portions for the hungry neighborhood children, those whom no one really saw in the hustle and bustle of Manhattan. James watched through the half-open window, motionless. The sight before him would shatter his ideas about success, power, and true greatness. This young woman, whom he had seen as a mere employee, was in reality a living example of courage and generosity. And tonight, he knew, he would never be able to see her the same way again. Emma descended the narrow stairs of her building, carrying her paper bag filled with leftovers. The warmth of the apartment contrasted sharply with the icy air outside, but she knew the real mission began beyond. She stepped out into the neighborhood she affectionately called the Forgotten One. Here, the buildings were old, the facades peeling, and the cracked concrete bore witness to years of neglect. Garbage cans overflowed, children played among the parked cars, and a few homeless people huddled under cardboard boxes. Every evening, Emma walked these streets to bring meals to families and children who had nothing. For her, this gesture was not a sacrifice, but a matter of course. She knew each face, knew who needed a blanket, who was hungry, who just needed a smile. James Whitman, still lurking in the shadows, followed her at a distance. His dark coat blended into the night, but his mind was racing. He had witnessed thousands of professional successes, signed enormous contracts, and led meetings where money and power seemed to be the only values. But what he saw now defied everything he thought he knew about life and true greatness. Emma stopped in front of a small group of children playing in the slush. Their enthusiasm was undiminished despite the cold and their poverty. She smiled at them and opened her bag, carefully distributing the portions she had prepared. The children's eyes shone with gratitude, but Emma looked away slightly, as if to remind them that this wasn't a performance, but a quiet act of solidarity. James felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in years, genuine admiration, tinged with an almost paternal concern. How could this young woman bear such a burden, alone, with a constant smile on her face? And why didn't anyone else see it? Emma, unaware of James's presence, continued on her way. She knocked on the door of a small, dilapidated building where a single mother lived with her 2 children. She placed the meals on the table, exchanged a few warm words, and left, as she did every evening, without seeking recognition. James was still following her, but for the first time, he felt the weight of his own life, his luxurious offices, his cars, his empire. Everything suddenly seemed empty next to the simple and courageous humanity that Emma embodied. That evening, he understood that what he was about to discover was not limited to an act of charity. He was about to see a force capable of changing lives, and perhaps even his own perception of the world. Emma stepped through the door of her modest apartment, lightly shaking the snow off her coat. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the aromas of simmering soup and fresh bread. Every object in the apartment seemed to have been carefully chosen, not for luxury, but for utility and comfort. The walls were covered with photographs of smiling children, some pinned to the wall, others placed on shelves. Each image told a story, a memory of those Emma had helped. She put down the bag containing the restaurant's leftovers and began preparing meals for the neighborhood children. It was a ritual she had followed for years. She chopped vegetables, warmed bread, and carefully divided the portions. Every gesture was precise, almost ceremonial. She didn't work for recognition or a title, but because she knew what she was doing had a real impact. Outside, James Whitman remained hidden in the shadows behind the half-open window. He couldn't believe his eyes. The young woman he had seen as a mere office worker, shy and reserved, was revealing incredible strength and generosity. She sought neither applause nor thanks, but every action she performed possessed a dignity that deeply fascinated him. Emma began filling boxes with meals, which she placed in a small bag that she would later take out to distribute around the neighborhood. Each box contained not only food, but also a handwritten note of encouragement: "Be brave, smile, you matter." For Emma, these words were just as valuable as the meals themselves. James felt a lump form in his throat. He realized he had just entered a world he had never seen or imagined. Far from luxurious offices and business meetings, he was discovering the true value of human action. He watched Emma hand a bowl of soup to a neighborhood child who had just timidly knocked on her door. The child's eyes lit up, and Emma smiled gently at him, never losing focus on her mission. For James, it was a moment of revelation. It was no longer mere curiosity. He understood that this young woman embodied what he himself had never been able to achieve despite all his success. He understood that true greatness lies not in money, titles, or power, but in the ability to touch and transform the lives of others, often silently. Emma, unaware of James's presence in the shadows, continued her work, unperturbed, determined, radiant. And James knew he could never return to his former life without confronting this shattering truth. Emma was placing the last box of food on the small table in her kitchen when she heard a slight noise behind her. She turned and saw James Whitman, standing in the shadow of the doorway, his face serious but intrigued. Her breath caught for a moment, as if time had stopped. What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling but firm, her eyes wide with surprise. James took a step forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Emma. I came to see for myself." She narrowed her eyes, suspicious. "You followed me?" "Yes," he admitted simply, without shame or arrogance. "I wanted to understand what you do every night." A heavy silence filled the room. The neighborhood children, whose laughter could sometimes be heard through the open windows, seemed to have stopped playing. Emma lowered her eyes for a moment, then raised them again with a hint of resignation. "So now you know everything." James nodded slowly. "I didn't know. I had no idea. I thought you were just an employee like any other. But what you do, it's incredible." Emma felt a mixture of anger and relief rising within her. Anger because he had invaded her privacy, relief because, for the first time, someone understood the implications of her actions. "It's not to impress anyone," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's just what I have to do." James took a step forward, sitting down on the small, worn sofa. "You're right. And that's exactly what I wanted to see. What you're doing, it's changing people's lives. And I think we could do even more, together." Emma looked at him, uncertain. "Together? I don't understand." "Let me explain," James replied. "I run a large company, and I realize now that we have the means to make a real difference. I don't just want to give money. I want us to create something that has a real, lasting impact. With you." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. She had never imagined that her humble gesture would attract someone like him, someone with the resources and influence to amplify her mission. But a part of her still hesitated. Could she trust a man accustomed to profits and contracts to understand the purity of her commitment? James observed her hesitation and smiled gently. "I know I don't have the right to ask you this, but I promise you one thing: if you agree, your work will never be diverted for selfish interests. I just want to help make it bigger." Emma took a deep breath, looking him in the eyes. For the first time, she felt a hesitant but sincere trust. "Very well, let's show them what we can do." The next morning, New York was still shrouded in winter mist. Emma was already up, preparing meals for the evening, when James gently knocked on her door. He was holding a small notebook, filled with ideas, plans, and proposals. "Hello, Emma," he said, his voice softer than the day before, but still serious. "I wanted to discuss how we could organize this properly." Emma let him in, looking at him with a mistrust tempered by a growing curiosity. "Properly?" she asked. "Yes," James replied, sitting down at the table. "You're doing incredible work, but I think we can reach even more lives if we use the company's resources, and my network." Emma felt a wave of emotion rising within her. She had always worked in the shadows, every gesture silent and discreet. To see a CEO, a man she never imagined would know her world, offering to help her, filled her with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "I don't want you to change what you're doing," James added quickly, anticipating her reaction. "I just want to give you the tools to go further, without you having to exhaust yourself on your own." Over the next few days, James began setting up a formal program with the company, called Solidarity Hearts. This involved collecting food from partner restaurants, coordinating volunteers, and providing supplies to families in need. Emma was at the heart of the project, guiding every step and carefully selecting the neighborhoods and children to support. On the first official day of the program, Emma drove James around the neighborhood she knew so well. The children ran toward her as soon as they saw her lunch bags, their eyes shining with joy. James watched them, moved. He realized that these smiles, this energy, were priceless. It was the first time he had seen the world not through numbers or profits, but through lives transformed. "You see," said Emma as she distributed the meals, "it's not much. Just food, a little warmth, but for them, it means everything." James nodded, his throat tight. "You're right, but even the small can become huge with the right people." That day, as the sun set behind the skyscrapers, James and Emma walked home together, light-hearted but aware that their collaboration had just begun. They knew that what they were doing went far beyond a simple project. They were sowing the seeds of real, lasting, and profoundly human change. A few weeks after the official launch of the Hearts of Solidarity program, James Whitman began to see changes he never could have imagined. Every evening, after the meal distributions, he returned home with a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. Watching Emma in action had transformed his worldview. In the company offices, employees also noticed the difference. The charitable initiatives had awakened something within them, collaboration replaced competition, and genuine enthusiasm took precedence over purely financial objectives. James felt a pride he had never experienced before. For the first time, a company's success wasn't measured solely in numbers, but in lives actually touched. One evening, while they were distributing meals in a park, a little boy approached Emma and handed her a drawing. On the paper, bright colors depicted Emma surrounded by happy children. He had written on it, clumsily, "Thank you for being kind." Emma smiled, moved, while James stood back, observing the scene. He understood then that greatness lay not in luxury or power, but in the ability to inspire and transform the lives of others. This simple gesture from Emma, humble and unassuming, had set in motion a chain of events that changed lives at every turn. "You know," James said softly, "I never understood how much of a difference one person could make." Emma looked at him, a slight smile on her lips. "It's not me. It's us, and it's them. Every smile, every thank you, they're the ones who give meaning to all of this." James nodded silently, aware that his priorities had changed. His empire, once founded on profit and prestige, now took on a new meaning. He knew that what he was seeing was not temporary, it was the beginning of a profound transformation, not only for the neighborhood, but also for himself. As they walked back into the freezing night, James felt a new conviction: true wealth was not what one possessed, but what one sowed in the hearts of others. And Emma, through her simplicity and generosity, had just taught him this lesson for life. A few weeks after the start of the Hearts of Solidarity program, Emma and James's actions began to attract attention. A local photographer, passing by the neighborhood, captured a picture of Emma distributing meals to children in the cold winter. The photo was published in a local newspaper and quickly shared on social media. The next morning, Emma opened her phone and was stunned. Dozens of notifications had piled up overnight. Messages of thanks, encouragement, and offers of support were pouring in from everywhere. She turned to James, who was watching the scene with a mixture of amusement and pride. "I think we're starting to reach people," he said softly. "Do you see what your courage inspires?" Emma shook her head, a shy smile on her lips. "I never wanted it to be for the spotlight. I just wanted to help." "And yet, being seen allows you to help even more," James replied. "People see what you're doing, and that encourages them to do the same." The program soon attracted the attention of several local and national media outlets. Articles and television reports told the story of this young employee who, every evening, helped children and families in need with quiet and admirable dedication. But James was careful to remain discreet. He refused to let the project become a marketing tool for the company. The focus remained entirely on Emma and the lives she was transforming. In the neighborhood, the effect was immediate. Volunteers began to show up spontaneously, bringing food, blankets, and even toys for the children. The residents, initially wary, began to open up and welcome this change. The program was no longer just an act of charity, it was becoming a symbol of hope and solidarity. One afternoon, while Emma was distributing meals in the park, a journalist approached her. "Can I ask you a few questions?" he asked. Emma nodded, slightly nervous. "Yes, but I want the focus to remain on the children and families, not on me." James, standing back, watched the scene with admiration. He knew that every word Emma spoke touched people's hearts and amplified their impact. He understood that sometimes, true influence lay not in the power of an office or a corporation, but in the sincerity of an action and the courage to remain true to one's convictions. That evening, as she returned to her apartment, Emma felt a mixture of astonishment and responsibility. Every child's smile, every word of thanks, every grateful glance, was now amplified by the outside world. And James, at her side, understood that what they were doing together went far beyond what he had initially imagined. A few months after the start of Cours Solidaires, Hearts in Solidarity, the neighborhood that everyone considered forgotten began to change. The dilapidated facades were still there, but something new was in the air: hope. The children, once shy and wary, played freely in the streets, their laughter echoing like an unexpected melody in the heart of the city. Emma and James distributed meals every evening, but they no longer simply fed the children. They had begun organizing educational workshops, reading sessions, and even art activities. Families received support with administrative procedures, employment, and access to healthcare. Every action, however small, had a visible impact. James watched Emma one evening, sitting on the floor with 3 children drawing on large sheets of white paper. Her face reflected a gentle concentration, a mixture of patience and kindness. He understood then that Emma's strength lay not only in her courage, but in her ability to connect deeply with others. "You see those children smiling like that?" James murmured. "It's thanks to you, and I'm beginning to understand that what you're doing goes far beyond what we imagined." Emma looked up, a shy smile playing on her lips. "No, it's thanks to them. And to everyone's small contributions. If everyone makes a gesture, however small, imagine the impact." The entire neighborhood began to feel this change. Neighbors helped each other more, local businesses participated by offering food, and even teenagers who used to hang around aimlessly began to get involved, proud to be part of something bigger than themselves. One evening, as Emma and James were about to leave, a woman from the neighborhood approached, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, for everything you do. You can't imagine how much it changes our lives." Emma felt her heart swell. She had always worked behind the scenes, and seeing this tangible, real, and sincere impact filled her with a mixture of joy and humility. James, standing beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder in support. He knew that what they had created together was more than a project, it was a silent revolution, born from a simple gesture, asking for leftovers at a restaurant. As the neighborhood lights twinkled in the night, Emma understood that every smile, every thank you, and every life touched was worth far more than she could have ever imagined. And James, for the first time in a long time, felt that his life, his work, and his choices finally had real meaning. The success of Hearts of Solidarity did not go unnoticed. Emma and James's stories circulated widely, inspiring other neighborhoods and local organizations. The children they had helped shared their experiences with their friends, and families recounted how this small program had changed their daily lives. What had begun as a simple act of generosity became a silent but powerful movement. One morning, James walked into Emma's office with a smile that betrayed his excitement. "Look at this," he said, handing her a series of letters and emails. "Neighborhoods all over the city are asking to replicate what we're doing here. They want to create their own initiatives with our help." Emma read through the messages, her eyes wide with emotion. Each letter told the same story: children fed, families helped, lives changed. I didn't think it would become this big," she murmured. "And yet, that's exactly what's happening," James replied. "You planted the seed. And now look, it's spreading." In the following weeks, they began forming teams to support other neighborhoods. Volunteers mobilized, bringing food, clothing, and above all, their time and their hearts. Local newspapers and media continued to share the story, but James and Emma remained true to their principle: the focus should remain on the children and families, never on them. One day, on her way home from a distribution, Emma stopped to watch a group of young people playing ball in the street. They were laughing heartily, carefree, and she realized it was the result of months of work and dedication. "You know," she said to James, "what we're doing doesn't just affect the children, it transforms the whole neighborhood." James looked at her, admiringly. "And it's changing me too. I thought I knew the world, but what you've shown me surpasses anything I could have imagined." That night, as they walked through the streetlights, Emma felt an immense sense of gratitude. What had begun as a modest request, a few leftovers from a meal, had sparked a chain of events that not only changed lives but inspired an entire movement. And James, by her side, understood that their collaboration had just redefined what it truly means to make an impact. A few months later, the once-forgotten neighborhood resembled a vibrant place, full of energy and hope. Facades were repainted, alleyways were decorated with colorful murals created by children, and residents worked together to sustain the transformation. Every smile and every burst of laughter testified to how far Emma had come since her first humble act. Emma and James walked through the streets, watching children play and families help each other. Every glance they met carried a silent thank you. Emma smiled, touched. "Can you believe it? It all started with a request for leftovers." James nodded. "Yes, and look what it's created. What you do every night is beyond imagination. You've changed lives, inspired hundreds of people, and you've changed me too." Emma lowered her gaze, a slight smile of modesty on her lips. "I could never have done this alone. You, the support, the program, all of it made it possible." Together, they attended the first major celebration held in the neighborhood, where all the families, volunteers, and children were gathered. The children recited poems, sang songs, and thanked Emma and James for their dedication. The parents, overcome with emotion, wept tears of joy, grateful for this transformation that had exceeded their wildest dreams. James then realized that true greatness lay not in his CEO title, nor in his businesses, nor in his wealth. It lay in creating a lasting impact, touching lives, and sowing hope in hearts. Emma, through her simplicity, generosity, and determination, had shown the way. As the evening drew to a close and the sky darkened, Emma placed her hand on James's shoulder. "This is just the beginning," she murmured. "As long as there are children to feed, families to help, there will be work to be done." James smiled, moved. "And as long as you're here, Emma, I'll be by your side." Their eyes met, filled with respect, admiration, and a deep connection. What had begun with a simple gesture, asking for leftovers, had triggered a chain of transformations, inspiring not only a neighborhood, but entire lives. And so, Emma Carter and James Whitman left an invisible but powerful legacy, proof that true greatness is born from simplicity, compassion, and the determination to change the world, one action at a time.